Joe here from the Top Chat YouTube channel, and today it's just me with my TOPinion episode 3. And today we're going to be discussing the current console generation and whether it's the best of all time. As always, like, comment, subscribe, and disagree with me in the comments. Just give some healthy debate. So let's get started. We are fast approaching the end of the 8th console generation, with the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One entering their twilight years. Even though Nintendo Switch is still in its relative infancy, because Nintendo like to be awkward and release consoles halfway through the generation, I think it's time to take a trip down memory lane and have a look at how well this console generation has done. Along with this, I want to ask the question, has this been the best console generation of all time? The start to the 8th console generation started with a bit of a cold war between Microsoft and Sony, with both companies seemingly waiting for the other to make the first move, after the relatively long 7th console generation. Then, in 2013, Sony made the first move in February, showing off the PlayStation 4 to excitement from press and fans alike. Then a couple of months later, it was Microsoft's turn, and they dropped the bomb of their original plan for the Xbox One. The reception was poor, with fans hating on some of Microsoft's innovative ideas, such as Always Online and the mandatory use of the Kinect. In the months that followed, Microsoft would drop some of the more unpopular ideas, and the 8th console generation began. And fast forward to present day, and Microsoft has never fully recovered from the botched reveal event, and has always been behind their arch nemesis Sony, who has been selling PS4s at a ridiculous rate. PS4 is currently sitting at 94 million consoles sold, making it the 4th best-selling home console of all time, but will soon more than likely pass the Nintendo Wii and PS1, which both sit at just over 100 million units sold. Meanwhile, the Xbox One sits at an estimated 40 million units sold, estimated because the losing side don't reveal their numbers. Surprise. Which in itself is a fairly respectable, but is considered by most a failure, especially when comparing it to such an outlier like the PS4. But the Nintendo Switch looks to be creeping up on the Xbox with 32 million units sold already, within 2 years of being on the market. Sony and Microsoft tend not to compare themselves against Nintendo consoles, however, with their consoles being untraditional machines that will have a completely different library of games, so they tend to be the second console for PlayStation, Xbox and PC players. With all these numbers in mind, it leads to the question, how does this generation fare against previous console generations? Well, with the video game industry as a whole on the incline every year from 1995 to 2018, rising console sales are to be expected. So, comparing the sales figures against console sale figures from the past is hard to look at when you consider the number of gamers increasing year on year, so what was once a 20 to 30 million unit sold console could now possibly be a 40 to 50 million unit sold console in the current market. Yet the argument can be made for the current generation of machines being a driving force behind that growth. So perhaps on that alone, that can make this generation above the rest. For sure, this generation has been a success for most. Obviously, PlayStation would be happy with their machine pushing 100 million units and by far and away winning this generation comfortably, unlike the struggle they had in the previous cycle. Nintendo as well have done extremely well to carry on carving out their space in the age of ultra high-def graphics, and with the Switch have definitely struck a similar chord to the Wii, imperative after the disappointment of the Wii U, which they have done well to recover from. Even Xbox have come through shining towards the end of the generation. With the appointment of Phil Spencer after the terrible Xbox One launch, they have found a leader and a philosophy that understands the wants and needs of gamers again, after losing sight of their audience. This has allowed for incredible consumer-friendly practices such as backwards compatibility and the Xbox Games Pass, which will be the tentpoles of their next console for sure. They missed the mark this generation when it came to first-party games, but having seen the success that Sony has had with their first-party strategy, they are surely gearing up to follow suit, particularly with a recent shopping spree of some talented studios such as Obsidian and Ninja Theory. For my money, with all this in mind, this generation could definitely finish as the best console generation of all time. As someone who started gaming in the 5th console generation, perhaps I'm being biased against the older consoles, and of course, people will look back at their childhood generations with much nostalgia and will defend those, which is fair enough. But trying to be as objective as possible when looking at the plethora of quality titles we are constantly getting, brand new consumer-friendly features and a level of connectivity we have not had before, I think we are getting more bang for our buck than ever before. It could be argued that more dangerous anti-consumer practices have also been introduced this generation that can tarnish many people's opinion on the generation. We've had things such as loot boxes, day one patches, and games launching with half the content locked behind paywalls. But sometimes we tend to look through rose-tinted glasses at previous console generations and romanticize the games around them. But often, games could launch completely broken with no way of a day one patch coming in to fix it. And obviously all console generations have had great games, like the SNES in the 4th generation had Link to the Past and Super Mario World, and the 6th generation had San Andreas and Shadow of the Colossus. But when it comes to our current generation, I think the concentration of truly great games has only increased with Breath of the Wild, Mario Odyssey, God of War, Red Dead Redemption 2, to name but a few who all deserve their place alongside video game greats. The argument for best console generation is obviously subjective to the individual, but not only that, to define the term best is entirely interpretive. For example, PS2 in the 6th generation is the best selling console of all time, and more than likely won't be beaten by the rampaging PS4. And this generation has also bought the first Xbox, which had its cult following, and Nintendo's last effort at a traditional home console that didn't sell well, which are all contributing factors towards the PS2's meteoric success, coupled with the fact that it was by far the cheapest DVD player on the market, just as the DVD trend was taking off, made it popular amongst non-gamers also, which are an asterisk against this console generation, which only really had one successful console in it. Another thing you can look at when determining the best of a generation is the cultural impact that a generation received, and in the 7th generation it could be argued that video games had a wider reach than ever before with the popularity of the Wii, that one Christmas when everyone gathered round to play virtual bowling with their grandparents. This shot the sales figures of the Wii over 100 million and was in everyone's house it seemed, along with very healthy sales of the Xbox 360 and PS3 after PlayStation's slow start. The Wii's success and impact led Microsoft and Sony to develop their own motion control system, with the Kinect and Move remotes respectively, as this was the trend that gaming was following. But unfortunately, this was just a quick fad that never really took off after early success of the Wii, and by the end of the console generation, it was clear that gamers wanted a controller pad, and stellar, less gimmicky games to play, a trend that the 8th generation of consoles ran with and excelled at more than any other. No matter your favourite console generation though, I think it's hard to argue against the success of this generation, and it can only bring so much excitement as to what we have coming for us next. If everyone comes out with the right message of games first when revealing their next consoles, I think it's going to be one of the most exciting times for us gamers, with the big three console manufacturers firing on all cylinders. Nintendo will surely keep it up with the Switch and the endless list of quality first party titles, and supplemented by the occasional port, mostly being the secondary machine for gamers, whilst Microsoft and Sony duke it out on the high spec side of the war. With Phil Spencer, Xbox has been steered back on track, and as they seem to be ending the generation on a high, I'm expecting big things from their next console, now they understand their mistakes in the past. Similarly, with Sony so fiercely dominating this current console generation, fears have been expressed about them returning to PS2 to PS3 style Sony, who similarly to Microsoft, lost touch with their audience and launched the PS3 late and with a ridiculous price point. These fears seem to have been laid to rest somewhat lately, when Sean Layden candidly spoke about their mistakes in the past and how they have learnt from them. So expect Sony to be doing much more of the same thing in the 9th generation, but perhaps they'll have to work a little bit harder with Nintendo and Xbox biting at their feet. And there we go, that's my argument for this generation being the best console generation. Let me know what generation you think is the best console generation. Not necessarily the best console, but just the generation as a whole. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, and see you next time. Bye for now.